Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri YouTube series. We are doing the second part of a longish letter from 1910 that Dmitri wrote from Tsarskoye Selo, where he was living, although he must have been daily in Petersburg, going to the Cavalry Academy and preparing for being a world-class steeplechaser. Okay, anyway, what's our recap from last time? So the date of this letter is 7th February, and we'll be doing the second of three parts. In the first part, Dmitri started out by acknowledging to Maria that he was a lazy pig, which is what she had called her, because he hadn't written to her, I think, in a month. And yeah, so she called him that. He agreed. He describes something of life at with Nicholas and Alexandra, being there as a member of the family, living with them, Alix just lying on the sofa all the time, according to him, and Anna Verubova being there every day, and Dmitri found her to be a repulsive presence. He was hearing about Rasputin. It is apparent that Rasputin was not being openly talked about, but he managed to pick up the information that Rasputin was at Verubova's house, either staying there or spending a lot of time there, that the Empress was visiting him there, and that on one of her visits to her brother and sister-in-law, Olga Alexandrovna went with Alix to Verubova's house and met Rasputin herself and was shocked by his insolence and the informality of his address to her. And Dmitri ends that first part of the letter by cautioning Maria to keep all of this a secret. All right, so the next part, today's part, we're talking about Alexei, and this time he doesn't caution Maria to keep it secret. And it's very interesting. Those of you who are fans of Alexandra may find it a little offensive, but so it goes. All right, here we go. Poor Alexei suffered with his leg and arm another 4 or 5 weeks after your departure, but now his pain has more or less gone, though if he himself bumps his arm or leg, he immediately cries from the pain. About the arrival of that gentleman whom Heinrich of Prussia spoke, the gentleman about whom Heinrich of Prussia spoke, there are already rumors, and among the doctors, of course, it is not considered desirable. It has turned out exactly as Heinrich thought it would, i.e. the doctors blank and call such gentlemen charlatans. Ostrogorsky says that the air doesn't have the real form of the disease, but that it could develop gradually if it's treated negligently, which is exactly what is happening. He also says that Aunt Alix has not taken his advice, and he gave the following example. When Alexei was still suffering horribly, Ostrogorsky ordered him to rest in bed and not get up, avoiding all movement that would, under the circumstances, cause harm. And what do you think Alix, the fool, did? After a week had passed, Ostrogorsky came and found Alexei playing on the floor with his sisters, jumping and running. To the doctor's absolute horror, which he immediately expressed, the Empress herself said to him, "I wanted to surprise you." "Naturally," said Ostrogorsky, "such surprises just cause one to wring one's hands. Isn't that idiotic?" Okay, so the idiotic here referring clearly to Alexandra and not to Ostrogorsky wringing his hands. So here, of course, we see Dmitri has a much different attitude toward Alexei than he did in 1909, when he suggested that that he hoped that Maria's son, that baby Leonard, would not in any way resemble or behave like Alexei. So rather harsh words. And now, when he sees this little guy suffering, of course he can't feel that way anymore. I think Alexei was 5 at the time, soon to turn 6. And yeah, it would be horrible to see a child suffering the way he did. So what was known about Alexei's illness? It was kept a secret, and it's interesting that Dmitri knew about it. In another instance, in a diary entry, I believe, he refers to it as that damned Hessian disease. So he definitely knew about it and knew what it was. And yeah, it's interesting. Now, Dmitri liked Ostrogorsky quite a lot. He was a doctor who was not only attached to Nicholas and Alexandra, but also when Dmitri needed to have a tonsillectomy, Ostrogorsky was the one who performed that surgery, if I recall correctly. He either performed it himself or he was the consultant doctor. Anyway, Dmitri obviously respected him, but this is, this idea that well, maybe Dmitri is reporting it wrong, that Ostrogorsky is saying that Alexei does not have full-blown hemophilia, that he doesn't have the real form of the disease. Maybe what that means is that Ostrogorsky was saying that he didn't have the severe form of the disease, and I think that's true. I don't think he did have the severest form of the disease. I don't think the form that, I read somewhere that the form that Queen Victoria passed on was not the most severe form of the disease. And in fact, that brings us to Heinrich of Prussia, who was married to Alexandra's sister, Irene, I don't know how you pronounce that in German, but I guess, anyway, Heinrich had 2 children with his first and third sons. He had 3 sons, and one of them died. I think he was 4 years old, and he hit his head, and he died tragically. And the older boy was heir to the throne, and Valdemar, he ended up living to be 56 years old, which I'm sure Alexandra and Nicholas must have looked upon that as a comforting thing. Was Valdemar older than Alexei? I mean, if he was quite a bit older, then it would have been comforting, I'm sure, to Nicholas and Alexandra to see that he was doing well. He made it to 56, age 56, and I gather the reason he ultimately died was because at the end of the war, when things were so fraught, he was unable to get a blood transfusion. He didn't have any children. I had to look that up to see if hemophilia affects a man's ability to have children, and apparently it doesn't, unless the man, or boy dies before that's a possibility. So I don't know why Valdemar didn't have any children. And certainly if the revolution hadn't happened, it would have been very interesting to see if Alexei made it to adulthood and was able to have a family. It doesn't seem like he was doing very well at the time of his death, even without the circumstances of what was going on with the family being prisoners. Sounds like he was pretty sick at the time. I think he was, 14? Anyway, that's all speculation. The big question is, how on earth did Dmitri hear this criticism coming from Dr. Ostrogorsky? It sounds like Dr. Ostrogorsky was not the most discreet person in the world. It was in 1915 that Dmitri had his tonsillectomy, so clearly Dr. Ostrogorsky had not been fired. But he was it sounds like he was talking a lot about things that, even now with a modern doctor not treating the imperial family, it would be transgressive to talk about someone's health and treatment. But Dmitri had heard this. It sounds like he heard it directly from Ostrogorsky, but he's not specifying that. So it would seem to me more likely that he'd heard it from a third party. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, was this true about Alexandra being negligent? I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of you out there viewing this who know more about that situation than I do, who know more about Alexei and his treatment and his parents' approach to raising a child with hemophilia. I've heard that they made a decision, which I think was a good one, if true, to, let him be a little boy and not wrap him up in cotton wool, so to speak. But if indeed Alexandra, disregarded Ostrogorsky's advice at that particular time to keep him in bed, rather than let him be roughhousing with his sisters, then yeah, that wasn't so good. That wasn't so good. And there was tension between Alexandra and Dmitri going all the way back to 1906 when Dmitri was only 14 years old, and Alexandra was the one who would step in when he was staying in Tsarskoye Selo and say, no, he can't do this. He can't go to dinners because he's too immature, he's too young. She would override Nicholas on those things. And, he had some harsh words for her back then when he was 14. So in this instance, he calls her the fool and complains about her idiocy. Interestingly, though, he puts the fool in parentheses, and immediately after it, he puts the sign of the cross, the fool sign of the cross. So what does that mean? I don't know. Dmitri had an anger issue. As those of you who watched the 1906 videos know, he complained, he talked in those videos on one occasion when he was very angry with Alexandra. He wrote in his diary, she's a blank, and then he said, no, I'm not going to use that word. I can control my anger. I'm not going to call her that. So maybe putting the sign of the cross after the fool is his way of sort of, he's angry, but his way of showing that, he's angry, but he's not really angry. Poor Alexandra. He never says that. He says poor Alexei. He never says poor Alexandra. He doesn't really enter into her suffering because he's focused on this idea that she's negligent and that she's being idiotic. So that's all interesting. It's all food for thought. And what do we have next time? We'll finish up the letter next time, and we'll mainly be talking about Dmitri's social life in Petersburg. Fairly new to him. Some interesting aspects of that. So I hope to see you next time. And yeah, take care. Bye.